You're listening to Online Pet Health Podcasts with Dr. Megan Kelly. Continuing education for veterinarian rehabilitation therapists. Learn more at onlinepethealth.com.
Hey Vetrehabbers! Today's podcast is a lecture from the IAVRPT's online conference earlier on this year. Sarah MacKeigan from Upward Dog Rehab and Wellness shares her lecture, Finding Your Voice in the Online World. She shares with us what she's learned, how COVID has impacted our day-to-day communication with one another, and how we can use this to benefit our practices. Sarah has a Facebook group also called Living with Dogs with Disabilities. It's a group dedicated to all the dogs with physical disabilities, also their dog parents, helping them with tips and advice on how to keep their pets moving and overcome their physical challenges. She has a program which is a degenerative myelopathy program specifically for pet owners. I'm going to pop all the links in the description. So if you have any pet owners, any clients you think would benefit from this group or the program, please share the details with them. Many of you know that I sit on the board of the IAVRPT, and that stands for the International Association of Veterinary Rehabilitation and Physical Therapists. It is the only international association in our profession, and I myself have been a member since 2009. Now, in addition to all the amazing work the association does for the profession, we also organize a conference. Now, the last conference was 2018 in Knoxville, Tennessee in the States. We've had a 4-year gap because of COVID, and so we are all raring to go and looking forward to meeting this year, 18th to the 20th of August in Cambridge in the UK. Registration is now open. We would love to see you there in person, but if you cannot make it, you can always purchase a virtual ticket. I'll put all the links in the description for the podcast. Myself and the Online Pet Health team are exhibiting at the conference. We'd love to see you, and we're also planning a UK Vetrehabbers meetup. If you want to be involved, you can click the WhatsApp link in the description, and we're going to be communicating with all of you exactly where and what we're going to be doing over this time. So this training you're going to find really interesting. Over to Sarah.
Today is really about what has challenged us and been opportunities over the last 2 years. How have things changed? And what does it mean as we move forward? And really, obviously, it's talking about that online component. But as we go forward, I just want to frame today's lecture a little bit and kind of set the foundation for what we're going to talk about. My own dogs, those of you that know me know a little bit about my story, but my own dog, Sammy, was the reason I actually got into canine rehab. She tore cruciates, and I found out through rehabbing her with a local vet that PTs could work with dogs. Literally sold my house to pay to go back to school, quit my job, became a licensed PT, and went on to get my diploma. In March of 2020, Sammy actually finished her battle with degenerative myelopathy. She had DM for almost 5 years. So at the time the world was in a global lockdown, I was mourning the loss of my heart dog. And everything was different, as you remember, and it still is very different. But at that time, going back to that time in 2020, we really didn't know what was going on. There was a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. Lockdown again, people very isolated, and services, especially people that were taking their pets to the vet and things like that, everything was changing. Access, communication, how these services worked, and ultimately we were spending a lot more time online. And I saw that myself, and it's actually one of the big reasons how I even got here, and having met a lot of you, was this increase in time we were spending online. But at the same time, there was a lot of people searching for health information related to their dogs and things like this and their pets, because they couldn't access their vets in the same way. You couldn't just pick up the phone and call your vet. You couldn't go into the clinic. If you had a question about your dog or your cat, everything was changing. And we actually were seeing a 70% rise in that first part of the pandemic in just online web browsing in general. And then if you want to flip it into this more of the social media area, in the first wave of the pandemic, social media engagement actually rose by 61%, which is a little bit staggering. And when I was seeing this online, having had a dog with DM, I was in a number of those like really big Facebook groups and things like that. And there's so much struggle, but also so much misinformation. Just, I want to say nonsense, but just things that make you go, what? Hence this idea of, there's a lot of misinformation. And this, having struggled with the loss of my dog and having that caregiver role and needing to do something, the changes in my own practice and being able to deliver a practice, I just wanted to be able to create or support this online community in some facet to give them real information and maybe more access to people like ourselves. And that's where Living with Dogs with Disabilities, this online community, came about in June of 2020. And the whole intent of this group was to focus on dog parents of dogs with different mobility challenges and increasing access and awareness to rehab professionals and how that they could help their own dogs. And today it's actually grown over the last 2 years substantially. I actually have almost 3.5 pet parents and professionals, which is the other part that I'm going to share a little bit about, but there's a lot of professionals in that group as well. And I say 50 plus interviews and live streams in there, but I think it actually might be more than that at this time, but it's turned into its own thing, but something really great. So that's a little bit about how or what we're going to talk about today. This image here, we're just talking about how services changed, because what really changed for us is how we delivered service and communicated, or we just didn't deliver service. And the image on the left is a qualitative study looking at the future challenges of physical therapy after the pandemic as experienced by PTs in Spain. The image on the right is looking at children with disabilities and how that model for delivery of service has changed. And again, it's really in the delivery and the communication. So, this idea of telehealth, how do we reach people, and information exchange, collaborating with others to deliver services. Moving into the animal healthcare field, there was a lot of similarities as to what was happening in the human healthcare field. The AVMA conducted 2 large surveys of vet practices in April and July of 2020, and researchers, they actually did this with 3,500 participants. This is some of the results from that, and they do really reflect what was also happening globally. But basically, social distancing, lockdowns were forcing a change in delivery of service. A lot of non-essential appointments were getting canceled. Dog owners, cat owners, pet owners were no longer able to accompany their animals into practice. Home visits were reduced, and communication was really, really challenged at this time. And there was this whole shift to curbside service, as well as more telehealth type services. This is a great report. This study interviewed 5,000 vet professionals across 91 countries and had similar results to that from the previous slide. But really what was interesting is, despite these challenges that were going on in terms of access and how things were changing, at the same time, the number of actual clinic visits was on the rise. And there's a variety of reasons for that. We're not going to get into pandemic puppies and those types of things in this lecture, but there was a variety of reasons. And at the end of the day, there was an increase in demand on the medical animal health field, essentially. In April of 2020, so there are lots of studies, lots of stats from 2020, the Canadian Vet Medical Association posted Telemedicine Guidelines. So there's this rise in this teletype care, digital care. So there's this need for how do we do this and what are the guidelines around it? The first paragraph of the document basically states that telemedicine refers to the practice of veterinary medicine, advice, diagnosis, treatment, which occurs at a distance using telecommunication between a veterinarian and an owner. In other words, telemedicine is veterinary medical practice tool and involves medical information regarding patient's client health status communicated via electronic methods. Telemedicine does not replace current veterinary medical practice, but is a complementary tool. And I think that part about it being a complementary tool is really key and part of our conversation today. And ultimately, people actually did use this service quite a bit, and the research out there now and the surveys that have been done indicate that when looking for a vet and working with your vet, people will continue to use this service, or they will be looking at it as an option when they're working with their veterinarians. And as we go forward, talking about owners, guardians, pet parents, a lot has changed and how they are as well. So at the beginning of COVID, obviously there was a lot of fear. People were just, same as human health, not accessing anything that wasn't essential, basically. There's a decrease in wellness routines, vaccinations, those types of things. There was definitely a decline in anything that was non-essential. And there were some various reasons for that. I mean, a lot of people obviously were in lockdown, were working from home. There was financial changes within the home, this idea of being isolated. But on a more positive note, there was actually a survey conducted by Banfield Pet Hospital where they asked, and it's reflected in a lot of literature, asked 1,000 pet parents about their relationship with their animals and how it's changed over the 2 years of COVID. And 95% of the respondents actually said that they were going to make their pets' veterinary care a priority over that in this upcoming year. And that is actually a change from 20% up to 95%. So that being home and being with your animals really made a positive impact as well, especially in relationship to health. So spending more time at home means that people are learning from home a lot more. And there is a lot more opportunity for online learning, and we're seeing a rise, and it doesn't seem to be declining. And I'm not going to say post-pandemic because we're not there, but it doesn't seem to be declining even as things open back up. People still want to learn online. There is more hybrid type approaches to learning where you do some in person and some online. And of course, media consumption, this is a little bit staggering, but again, everybody was at home in front of their computers for most of the time, and it became how we connected. There was a need for an increased connection, was so clear at the start of the pandemic. We've talked about it even in conversations before this lecture and the other lectures around just having more access, talking to more people on Zoom. And you saw all the challenges, the push-up challenges, the squat challenges, all of these things online. This information here was taken from a research group called Kantar, and it was the results of a global study where they looked at consumer attitudes and trends, media habits, and expectations during the pandemic. And they actually surveyed 25,000 people across 30 different markets and found, again, an increase in everything, essentially. Further to this point was the rise in social media. So what was really interesting is the coronavirus was actually the first pandemic in history that was ever had the technology and social media that was used to promote news, promote messages, share information, and keep people connected. And part of this challenge, though, again, is this misinformation, because not everything you read online is true. Interestingly enough, this was a very interesting study where they looked at the use of pet parents in social media groups, and in particular Facebook groups, because Facebook groups have that sense of community. There's that like interest in those groups. And even though people didn't feel like they were a reliable source of information, 50% of cat and dog respondents were actually still sharing information, either giving or taking health advice for their pets in Facebook groups. What was a little bit more interesting was that when looking at dog health, the information most commonly exchanged was dermatology, gastroenterology, and orthopedics. But again, this problem of misinformation is a real thing. When we're referring to it here, they're thinking of it more in the realm of COVID and the information and how it's being spread related to the virus, but we can even take it further just to look at information in general and misinformation. So an infodemic is an overabundance of information, both on and offline, with some of it, with information being used appropriately and inappropriately, essentially, which again goes back to the reason, one of the main reasons why I had started my original Facebook group was just getting tired of seeing all of this misinformation that was online, trying to help dogs in particular with their mobility challenges. So what did we learn from all of this? Medical professionals, as well as a layperson, use social media to help connect each other and to promote information. So There's actually a term out there for this. So collective intelligence is this idea, and it's what we kind of do really. It's this idea of using Facebook groups as a way to share information, education, collaborate, information sharing, including academic posts and ideas in a professional field. At the same time, the layperson uses social media a lot or Facebook groups in particular, for creating more connection, entertainment, sharing, that type of thing. So really it delves into both fields, but people use it in different ways. Collaborative learning is a way that students learn, and they actually have looked at social media as a medium for social media platforms as a way of facilitating collaborative learning. And this research actually indicated that social media plays an important role in the pandemic because it provides opportunities for students to enhance collaborative learning under challenging situations. And then again, we're seeing this trend continue even as doors begin to open back up. So the reality is, like it or not, online is here to stay, not really going away. And digital physiotherapy, we talked a little bit about it before, but really think of it as a way of improving or increasing access, flexibility of delivery, and reach, really. Social media also helps with professionals in terms of facilitating meaningful connections with colleagues, with other researchers, with clients, with patients, and giving a voice to the profession and its reputation. Going back to this idea of misinformation, social media gives an opportunity to share credible information and showcase that and where that comes from, so that people begin to learn what's credible and what's not. There was a lot of information in this study, but really what it comes down to is that people want to search online, and that relationships with animal health professionals can be enhanced when animal health professionals support those online searches and provide resources for them. And this idea of a care bond between the owner or the pet parent and the health professional, the animal health professional. This study looked at conversations between vets and pet parents regarding online information that can positively impact professional relationships with veterinarians. And the more supportive we are of people, because nobody likes Dr. Google, but the more supportive we are and the more we can redirect people to reliable sources of information, it actually has been shown that it enhances our relationship with the clients and the likelihood of them continuing to want to work with us. So how can being online, we've covered a lot, how can being online improve awareness and access to animal rehab? In a number of ways. Obviously, the reach is substantial. I'm in Nova Scotia, Canada, and you are everywhere else in the world. So the reach of doing things digitally cannot be denied. And this idea of continuity of care and being able to reach people within their homes, however that may look. And again, raising the standard of care, but really what we're talking about is, there's a lot, going back to that misinformation. There was a rise in the number of, and again, I'm using Facebook, but there was a rise in the number of Facebook groups and coming up with information that isn't necessarily valid information or good information. And we're like, oh my gosh, when you look at that, you're like, no. Being online actually helps to showcase what we can do and raise awareness and show the difference between the person that took the weekend massage course that now offers online classes for doggy massage and someone that's been practicing vet rehab or canine rehab for the last 10 years. Begins to showcase the difference. Empowering through education, collaborative learning. Online communities really do create more supportive fields for helping people learn when they have a common interest and they can work with each other. And I also talk about your own credibility. I think that's a given here, and just scalable interventions as well as targeted interventions. So you can go big and reach a lot of people, or you can really hone in. I look at some different groups that are out there right now. For example, another canine rehab therapist, Shauna Clow, has a Facebook group for senior dogs. Lisa Biedenbaugh has one for hip dysplasia. So you can hone in or you can scale up. Things that I learned from my own group were actually quite fascinating. Some are a bit expected and some were not expected at all. And I did want to share these with you because I think there's some good takeaways. The idea of community is vital, and trust in community. If people don't know you, but they are within a group and there's a common interest within a group, they're much more likely to listen to the community than to listen to someone that they don't know. So this idea of community is important, but also during the pandemic, there was so much isolation. That's also where the community aspect rose. And then having a dog with some type of injury or disability or paralysis and I say dogs because that's primarily who I work with, but whatever animals you work with, people have this sense of isolation when their dog or their pet gets injured. And that was amplified during the pandemic. So this idea of having like-minded individuals going through a similar experience is really important. At the same time, there's a lot of misconceptions about who we are, what we do, and people just don't even really know sometimes that we even exist. And then again, the understanding of what the services are and who's delivering them. The difference between someone that is taken a weekend course and is, delivering an underwater treadmill service versus someone that's trained to evaluate your dog and see how much, how high should the water level be? How long do we want to go? What are the signs of the fatigue? What are the signs of improvement? A lot of people don't know about a lot of those things. And that kind of lends itself to this challenge of understanding that recommendations you dog owners and pet parents will get online are not the same as a personalized program. And again, I've literally been asked that question. What's the difference between what you can do and what this Facebook group is telling me to do? On a separate note, but a note that was really a really positive one for me, we want to share. People want to share their knowledge and want to help. And, with the rise in the size of the group, I've been challenged to maintain the integrity of what it's all about and this focus on, mobility and access and education. And I love the fact that there's other professionals out there that, will see a post and they'll jump in and they'll use their knowledge to share within that. So it's not my Facebook group. I kind of see it as a professional group where everybody gets to share that way. And I'm really, really thrilled that that is happening. And the other reason that we need to show up online again is if we don't, others will. And if, whether it's a pet parent that's taken Tellington Touch and wants to share it with everybody in a Facebook group, or somebody that's written a book about their journey with their dog, if they're showing up online and, we're challenged often with people calling things physical therapy and animal rehab, and whether, are they actually certified? Do they really have a diploma or certification? How much do they know? But they're showing up online. So that's the other reason why we need to show up online is we need to use our own voices to show who we are and what we can do. In this last part, we're just going to talk a little bit about what finding your voice looks like. And really, this isn't about, how many times you should post or what you should write or anything like that. This is about how you can show up. And everybody has a different thing, whether it's through their website. Some people like to write. Some people like to be in front of a camera. Some people like to talk are creative. And some people don't have time. So they maybe want to be on somebody else's platform sharing information, or maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's just going back to, improving those client relationships and them being online. Maybe it's just referring to these online sources, referring to your colleagues that have different things online to send your clients to as well, to gather information, because it's that abundance mindset and that sharing mindset that there's a lot of information out there. We're going to direct people to where they can access it and support each other at the same time. So really supporting each other. And what do you like to do? You don't have to do everything. A few takeaways here the demand for online support is skyrocketed during the pandemic. That's not going to change. It's going to continue to rise. There's lots of ways to use technology to support what you're doing, and that this is really about augmenting what you're already doing, not replacing. So it's kind of a hybrid approach, and that we can support each other. And keeping in mind who we're talking to when we're talking online, whether we're going through blogs or through podcasts or Facebook Lives, not to overload with information. It's not about us and how much we know. It's about credibility. It's about supporting the dog parent or the pet parent or the horse owner within that area. So we don't want to overload them with information, and working together to help each other and support each other through this. So I want to finish off with kind of 3 final thoughts. Online is here. It's not going anywhere. And there's lots of ways that you can support your clients and the profession as a whole online. Leading into the second point of professional credibility, there's a real opportunity for us here to do something that we haven't done a lot of in the past, at least as physiotherapists, and promote the profession through education online. There's a real opportunity for that. And then my last point is a little bit more of a personal one. Follow what you love to do, something that's innate, whether it's writing a blog post or writing a newsletter, or maybe just showing up on somebody else's platform and supporting them, or sending your clients there for additional information. Those are my 3 final thoughts as I finish up.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time I load a new podcast. And please, if you get a moment, head over to Stitcher or iTunes and leave me a review. It's a really lonely job being a podcaster, and so the only time I get to hear from you or know that you're out there is when I get a review. And know that I read every single one of your reviews. So to those of you that have left reviews, I want to say a very, very big thank you. Every time we get a review, it really helps to get the veterinary rehabilitation podcast out there to all the Vetrehabbers all over the world. All right, Vetrehabbers, so if you are looking for more continuing education in the field of veterinary rehabilitation, head over to Onlinepethealth.com. Go be awesome, guys.